Hello and welcome to See You in Court, the podcast that informs you about the Georgia civil justice system, what it means to you, and how it protects individual rights. This podcast is a collaboration between the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation and the Georgia Institute of Technology. Your hosts are Robin Fraser Clark and Lester Tate, who are both past presidents of the State Bar of Georgia and currently serve on the board of directors of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. And now this episode of See You in Court.
Good morning, friends and lovers of the law, and welcome to See You in Court. I am Robin Fraser Clark, and with us here today is our co-host, Lester Tate. Lester?
How you doing, Robin?
I'm doing
I love
great.
that we always begin this with good morning, even though, you know, and it sort of, we are not going to acknowledge that some of our listeners may listen to it as a bedtime story at night and it puts folks to sleep. But I like that intro. I like our optimism on it.
Mm-hmm. Good point, because we're taping right now a little bit after 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon. So I just automatically say good morning.
I like it. I like it. I don't think we ought to change a thing about it. And it's always great to tape on a Friday, I think.
I think so, too, because as soon as we finish taping, we may have a post-taping celebratory beverage or two.
I'm in favor of that. And as I mentioned earlier before we went on the air here, you know, tonight the Falcons play in their first preseason game and the Braves are on. So that's going to be a start for a good weekend for me.
Sounds great. Well, we're really excited today to be talking about Georgia trial courts. And to help us understand it, we're thrilled to have the Honorable Mike Jacobs, Judge of the DeKalb County State Court, with us today. Let me introduce our listeners to Judge Mike Jacobs. Judge Mike Jacobs has served on the State Court of DeKalb County since June of 2015. Mike is the first openly LGBTQ plus countywide elected official in DeKalb County history and the county's first openly LGBTQ plus trial judge. Mike serves on the board of directors of Leadership DeKalb, chairs Government Day for the program, and is a member of the class of 2016. As he says, the best class ever.
Well, every class says that.
He also serves on the board of directors of the Stonewall Bar Association of Georgia and as secretary and a board member of the International Association of LGBTQ plus judges. Prior to his judicial service, Mike served 10 and a half years in the Georgia House of Representatives, representing the DeKalb communities of Brookhaven, Chamblee, and Toco Hills. He was chairman of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Oversight Committee, also known as MARTOC, MARTOC, the Joint House and Senate Committee that oversees MARTA's management, budget, and fiscal affairs. He also served as chairman of one of the two subcommittees of the House Judiciary Committee. In 2010, Mike received the Allen Thornell Political Advancement Award from Georgia Equality for authoring and passing a stronger anti-bullying law for public schools. In 2012, Mike served on the Special Joint Committee on Criminal Justice Reform, which vetted major reforms that place greater emphasis on rehabilitating nonviolent offenders to lead productive lives. In 2014, interim CEO Lee May appointed Mike to the DeKalb Operations Task Force, the OTF. The OTF recommended county government reforms that the General Assembly enacted to help DeKalb County function better, including DeKalb's SPLOST, that's SPLOST, which Mike authored and passed in 2015. In 2019, Mike was recognized by the Stonewall Bar Association of Georgia at its annual awards gala with the award for outstanding service to the Stonewall community. Before joining the bench, Mike was a solo practitioner for 4 years, focusing his practice on consumer bankruptcy and debtor-creditor litigation. Prior to starting his own law practice, Mike was an associate at Alston & Bird, Crevlin & Horst, and Hall Booth Smith & Slover, I think it's pronounced. Mike received his law degree magna cum laude from the University of Georgia School of Law in 2003. While at UGA Law, He served as executive articles editor of the Georgia Law Review. In 1997, Mike received his bachelor's degree from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Mike is the proud parent of 3 children, Jonah, Eli, and Samantha. Judge
Welcome,
Jacobs,
Mike.
welcome to the show.
That's such an impressive resume, too.
I know.
I'm reminded of the late George T. Smith, who, renowned for having served in all 3 branches of government. He was lieutenant governor. He was on the Supreme Court, and was in the legislature. And you've almost got the trifecta there, Mike.
Not too late.
Well, good morning, Robin, and good morning, Lester.
Good morning.
and I think I'm going to keep it at 2.
Okay. Well, as a DeKalb County citizen, I'm glad to hear that, because we love right where you are on the DeKalb County State Court bench. But let's talk a little bit about your service to the state of Georgia. First, your public service as a representative for DeKalb County in the State House, which I think might be the first time I met you when you were serving as a representative and on the Judiciary Committee, which is the committee, well, you can tell us, but really the committee that most lawyers have any sort of interaction with. Tell us a little bit about your career as a representative. Why did you want to run for office? And how do you feel about that? How was your time there at the Capitol?
Well, I mean, like anyone who gets into public service, you only do this for others. And I ran to make a difference. I mean, for lack of a better way to put it, I mean, that it sounds cliche, but it's true. And if that isn't the reason that you throw your hat in the ring, for public service, then you really need to be reevaluating, what you're doing and why you're doing it. And so, I did that at a very young age. I was, that's one of my colleagues calling, actually, but I will get back to her right after we're done taping. So I
tell your colleague you're talking to the most important people around. The 2 that run the podcast there. That's why I ran for office at a very young age. I think that campaign started less than a year out of law school. I graduated from law school in 2003 and was elected to the General Assembly in 2004. So indeed, that campaign did start less than a year out of law school.
That's amazing. What firm were you working for at that time?
At the time, I was at Alston & Bird, and Alston & Bird was gracious enough to allow me to run while I was an associate there. In hindsight, I might have started that a bit later. I didn't, I had always been interested in public service, and it was an opportunity that seemed difficult to pass up at the time. But I do, in hindsight, wish that I had spent more time developing as a young attorney before going into the legislature. That being said, I got to participate in some impactful things that benefited a lot of people, and that's important to me. The criminal justice reform, the revision of the Georgia Evidence Code. I also was on the committee that vetted, sat there with Paul Milich for meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting.
I was on that committee too, representing Georgia trial lawyers. That was an interesting way to spend Thursday afternoons, as I recall.
It was. But, that's the evidence code we're still operating under to this day. And, and it's important that Georgia's evidence code lines up with the federal rules of evidence, and the way that the evidence code is organized in most states. I mean, we were very much an outlier at the time, and we're not anymore, and that's important. And I can say I remember when, and that's
I'm
cool.
I'm glad you remember when, Mike, because that was 13 years ago, because it was the year I was the state bar president. And I remember you got that thing sailing through the House of Representatives. It passed, and then we had to, get crowbars and hacksaws to pull it through the Senate there at the end. But we did by a pretty wide margin, at the end. But I especially appreciate all the work that you and Robin did on that for Georgia trial lawyers, because it was about 40 years in the making. I mean, literally about 40 years in the making.
Yeah, I mean, as a former House member, I suppose I would say it's the Senate that's always difficult. But if you ask a senator, they might tell you differently. So, but yeah, I mean, those were significant changes that underscore why it's important to have lawyers serve in the legislature. I mean, the technical aspects of the rules of evidence, or how criminal justice reforms, actually operate on the ground in court. Those are things that lawyers first and foremost understand and can speak to and inform their colleagues about. And at the end of the day, when you are a lawmaker, that is what you are doing, is making the law, and operationally it has to work, when applied by a judge. So one hopes that more lawyers find their way into the legislature at whatever age. It becomes, I think, difficult. I say I wish I had held off, but then again, it's also true that the more entrenched you become in your practice, the less likely you are to run for the legislature. So, I mean, maybe it was a blessing in the sense that, I was at a point in my career where I hadn't really decided what path I was ultimately going to take, and had an opportunity to do this, for 10 and a half years.
It's been said we've got a part-time legislature. I think the pay for being a state legislator is only slightly below the poverty line right now. It's supposed to be a part-time job, but it has become more and more and more a full-time job. I worked down at the legislature in 1983, and you were home by St. Patrick's Day, and now it frequently goes into to April or May. And curious to know what you think about having a part-time legislature and about the pay you get for a part-time legislature. I mean, as a legislator, some folks have said we only have the impoverished, the retired, and the independently wealthy representing us in a part-time legislature. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I can speak from experience, and probably just leave it at that. I mean, I don't, how state legislators are compensated is a policy matter that is, curiously enough, within their realm. And so it's not really something that I would comment on in my current position, but just thinking from experience, I will say that it is, having been there and done that it is difficult, because the legislature is, sure, it's full-time while the legislature is in session, and in theory, part-time when you're out of session. But boy, there are times during that out of session period where it feels like it's a full-time job. And, you try to, especially, I will tell you that it was difficult. It's different when you're in a firm and you have kind of that safety net of, other attorneys and a support staff, to rely upon to kind of help carry everything forward while you're serving in the legislature, but boy, as a solo practitioner, that was difficult. And that was the last 4 years of my practice. And so it's, it is, I do think that the circumstances of, just speaking from experience, the circumstances surrounding the amount of time that it takes to serve as a legislator and what members of the legislature are compensated make it difficult to get a full diversity of, in general, life experience in the legislature, and then more specifically among lawyers, practice experience in the legislature. What types among the lawyers, what types of practice backgrounds do the lawyers who serve in the legislature come from?
I think there may be, in the general public, maybe a slight misconception about how many lawyers are in the state House of Representatives or the state Senate. I feel like some folks think it's full of lawyers. I heard somebody on the news the other night say, well, the legislature is full of lawyers. Well, that's not true. It has very few lawyers. I think I don't know what the count is now, but it was only about 20 or 25 lawyers not too long ago. Do you think that there should be more lawyers running for office to be in the House or the Senate? Do you think that would be helpful, considering they're the folks who write the laws? Oh,
well, I definitely think it's helpful from the standpoint of, the way that, having people in the legislature who can speak to the way that the laws that are passed work operationally in our legal system. I also I'm happy to go, judges are permitted to interact with members of the legislature around matters affecting judicial administration and the law. And I do find it easier for me to explain things to a lawyer legislator than not when I'm engaged in that. And I think that's just reality. So yes, it is helpful to have more lawyers in the legislature because that is the job, lawmaking. And you are also correct that I have the 5 sitting out in the waiting area of chambers. I have the framed. Each of the 5 photographs that I appeared in of the cover of the Georgia Bar Journal with the lawyer legislators. In fact, Robin, I believe you're in one of those photos.
I think I remember that. That was a neat photograph. I love that.
And if you count the legislators in there and divide that by 236 seats in the House and Senate, you'll find that that percentage is not as high as people in general might think it is.
Agreed. We've heard a little bit, Judge Jacobs, about your work as a legislator. You talked a little bit about the evidence code, helping get that through. And by the way, I wanted to tell you that so it went into effect January 1, 2013, 10 years ago, and we still call it the new evidence code. I think that's so funny. I hear that in argument in court all the time. Well, under the new evidence code, I'm like, man, it's 10 years old. Anyway, I've heard a little bit about your work on that. Your work on the Criminal Justice Reform Committee, which was very important, and I know a subject near and dear to Governor Deal's heart. Tell us some other things that you're particularly proud of as your work as a representative.
Well, I mean, I had one of the things that you pointed out. I try not to comment on, given my current role, things that are more controversial. But obviously, I identify as a member of the LGBTQ plus community and was involved in some issues, both positive and negative, that impacted that impacted the community. And those things are obviously, near and dear to me. One of the one that I've received, we passed, and I believe the legislature has come back a couple of times and further refined the law. But we passed a fairly substantial reform to the state's anti-bullying law that exists in the education code. In 2010, and that was something that I worked on with Simone Bell, a former state representative, and Georgia Equality at the time, and it followed a rather tragic bullying incident that was well publicized at the time. It was the impetus for really pushing forward with that legislation, and I'm tearing up as I'm talking about it.
Well, I mean, and it was needed, and it helped. It's helped, obviously, that we don't have that kind of situation, or at least it's not as rampant as it was before. So that's exactly what we need to have done in the legislature. So I applaud you, and I applaud your efforts, and I also applaud you for being a lawyer and saying, I'm going to help others, not only as my role as an advocate, as a lawyer, but public service in the legislature. That is a huge undertaking. And, thank you for doing it all those years. Let's go to 2015, though, when the governor selects you. How about that, to become judge of DeKalb County State Court? Tell us what that was like. What do you remember about that?
Well, first of all, it's quite a process, the appointment process, filling out that application and sitting in that interview in the state bar headquarters at that very, very long conference table. I that also all occurred at a time that, I think I'll just talk about it in generic terms, but there was a negative piece of legislation affecting the LGBTQ plus community that was pending in the legislature in 2015 and again in 2016. Governor Deal ultimately vetoed it, but I was on the front lines of that in 2015, and right before that appointment happened, that reached a crescendo right at the end of that legislative session, and there was a lot of political heat that felt very personal that was directed at me at that time. And actually, oddly enough, in that entire appointment process, that's maybe the thing that I remember the most. I had interviewed and then made the short list and interviewed with the governor and was a member of the General Assembly at the time and working on something that was very big and important in the moment, and stood up and did what needed to be done, in my opinion, as a legislator at the time, and took a lot of heat for it, and some of that was very personal in its tone, and here I am today, though.
And it worked out because you got appointed by the governor to the state court bench, which I appear in front of quite a bit. I live in DeKalb County, although my office is in Fulton County. And we have often called DeKalb County State Court Bench the most diverse bench in the state of Georgia. Do you agree?
I do agree. We have a total of 11 judges. There are two divisions to our court. Well, I guess if we're talking about the history of our court, we might as well start with the fact that, DeKalb County had this old timey recorder's court that handled traffic citations that actually, there was a legal argument. This also occurred in a lot of things happened in 2015.
Okay.
But another thing that happened in 2015 was that there was a legal challenge to the constitution of that court that appeared to have merit. I don't know that I don't remember whether or not a judge actually ever ruled upon it, but the legislature clearly felt the need to take action on it. I believe Sherry Boston, who was then the Solicitor General of DeKalb County, she was the solicitor at the time, had approached us about the issue and what it would mean if that legal challenge prevailed. And so we folded, the traffic citations are misdemeanors in the state of Georgia. So the court where all of those cases would go and the Recorder's Court also handled ordinance violations, which go to magistrate court. But where all of those cases should reside in Georgia's uniform structure is the state court. But boy, that's a lot of cases, and definitely a large number of cases to be dumping, on top of the 7 then existing judges of the state court, who also have complex civil dockets and a large misdemeanor court docket that doesn't involve traffic citations. So there's now 11 judges, 7 on Division A, who handle primarily civil that ends in monetary judgment. I guess I'm covering the jurisdiction of the state.
Sure, let's talk about it. Yeah,
sure. Civil that ends
and you're in Division A.
I'm in Division A, so I'm in Division 5 of Division A, and 5 is my lucky number. So I guess that's
good.
That's a happy coincidence there. But I was born on May 15th. That's probably why. But the state court's jurisdiction, generally speaking, is civil that ends in monetary judgments of any size, so non-equity civil. And then misdemeanor criminal cases below the grade of felony. So that's high and aggravated misdemeanors and regular misdemeanors. So,
and by the way, too, not every like Bartow County, where my office is, doesn't even have a state court. Polk County, where I grew up, doesn't have a state court. So not every county has those, but they're really the workhorse of a lot of your metro counties.
Well, absolutely. I mean, because we take on high volume classes of cases that would otherwise go to the superior courts and have, this is not, there are other classes of cases that are in superior court that are high priority. I mean, they have exclusive jurisdiction over felony cases. So, you get a speedy trial demand in a lot of felony cases, and then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of small cases, smaller in magnitude, fall in line behind that, and that's just reality. So, what we do, the role that the state court plays in the counties where we exist, is, to deal with a couple of higher volume dockets that would otherwise be in superior court. And so, you largely find state courts in the metro counties. The largest, we're near the largest in terms of the number of judges. I think maybe Cobb County has one more judge than us. But Fulton County also has a large state court bench, 10. There's a large state court bench up in Gwinnett. So, we're primarily in the metro counties, but not exclusively. And and the misdemeanor docket is high volume. A lot of the civil docket is high volume, but what I love about the state court is I also get to, because it's civil that ends in monetary judgments of any size. I also get good, interesting, complex medical malpractice, products liability, premises liability cases. I mean, the vast majority of my written work, like 99% of it, is on the civil side of the docket. And as someone who was a civil practitioner, I love that. But getting back to your question, Robin, none of that actually responds to the question that you asked.
It's all right.
But you didn't object that I'm being non-responsive. So
no, I would never object to you. Don't worry.
But we, so we have 11 judges, and are very representative. That bench is very representative of the community we serve. We have the first Asian American judge in the state, Al Wong, who's our chief judge now. Wayne Purdom was for many years, and now Judge Wong is our chief judge. He's doing a great job as our chief, actually. And
is actually joined me in the American Bar Association House of Delegates, and I was with him in Denver last week, as is and also Ron Ramsey, who is another one of your state court judges. So we've got a good contingency there in the ABA House delegation.
Absolutely. And Ron was just Judge Ramsey, who I served with in the legislature. He's another former legislator. He was a state senator. And Ron and I had a great Judge Ramsey and I had a great, I'm used to calling him Ron when I talk with him, but the Judge Ramsey and I had a great working relationship. We were both DeKalb County legislators back when I was in the legislature, and I'm proud to call him a friend. That relationship has continued on, during our time serving together on the bench, and it's been really a great relationship that has continued from one branch of government to the other. And we, Ana Maria Martinez, who's the first Latina trial judge in the state. We've also had two of only a very small number of Latino trial judges who have served in the past. Tony Del Campo, who's now the president of the state bar, and Dax Lopez as well. And not many courts can boast having LGBTQ people serve as trial judges either. And we now have two openly gay judges on the bench. So it's, we are truly a bench that reflects the DeKalb County community in every sense of the word diversity. I mean, we're a very diverse bench.
Well, why is that important to have a state court bench, which we have always said is if a citizen is going to interact with the justice system, it's most likely going to be at a state court. But why is that important to have your bench reflect the diversity or the makeup of the county?
Because it instills confidence in the public that they see people who are like them and who have their life experiences serving, up there on the bench. I mean, that's I don't think there's a better way to put it. The reality is, and I see it every time I bring a jury pool into the courtroom. In civil cases, that's always a minimum of 36 people. In some of our more complex cases, it's a larger jury pool. But you definitely get you definitely see the full diversity of DeKalb County on display in those jury pools, and in every sense of the identities of the people who fill out our jury pools, the residents of DeKalb County who fill out our jury pools, you can see that reflected on the bench on the DeKalb County State Court, and that's a great thing.
Let me tell you, I was trying a case in front of you several years ago. I don't know if you remember this. but talking about the diversity of the jury pool in DeKalb County. And you were bringing the jurors in and you tell the attorneys, okay, just to let you know before we began asking the jury questions, just want to let you guys know that we're going to have a translator with one of the jurors, and we're going to have an Amharic translator because we have a person who only speaks that. She's from Ethiopia, and just want to let you know. And you said that just like it was just a normal everyday occurrence in DeKalb. We're going to have a translator in the jury pool. Don't worry about it. Just know that translator sitting next to juror number 43 or whatever during voir dire. And I wanted to tell you, I don't think I've ever told you this. Of course, we said no problem, and it worked fine. I mean, there was not even a hiccup with a translator. But go back 30-something years when I first started practicing law, and I did a lot of pro bono work for the Georgia Commission on Hearing Impaired, and I represented a deaf DeKalb County citizen who wanted to participate in jury selection, wanted to do his public service, but he only knew ASL, American Sign Language, and DeKalb wouldn't appoint a translator for him to participate. And I represented him and went to the presiding judge of DeKalb County Superior Court 30 years ago and pled the case and got an order making DeKalb County pay for an American Sign Language interpreter so this citizen could participate in jury selection. So when that happened in front of you, when you brought in a translator for this Ethiopian woman, I immediately thought, man, have we progressed? I had to go get an order to allow a deaf person to participate in jury selection. Here now, 30 years later, you bring in a translator and we never skip a beat. I just thought that was a really powerful moment, not only for DeKalb, but honestly, Judge, for my law practice to see that really come full circle.
Well, and we should be at a point in 2023 where we're not skipping a beat. I mean,
yeah.
Our jury pools, should be enabled without question to reflect the full diversity of our community. I can give you an anecdote from, the cool thing about our bench is that we have, pretty much for every identity, there is someone with relevant experience on our bench. And so we're resources for one another, which is great. To give you an example of where that's come into play for me, I had a transgender juror in a jury pool, a civil jury pool. It's very difficult to change identifying information on government documents. And of course, that's what, fills out our jury list. So in this particular instance, I had a juror with a female name and a female gender marker on a jury list in a civil jury pool. And I go down the rows and have the jurors introduce themselves by name at the beginning of jury selection. I think you experienced that. And in this particular instance, I could tell that now the juror, because the courtroom's a very intimidating place, or can be an intimidating place. The juror just gave the female name that was on the list in front of me, but in hearing him speak, I knew that, I was dealing with someone who identifies otherwise. So, we get further into the jury selection process. We, do general questioning first. So that's just people raising their numbered placards. But once we got to specific questioning for this, and I usually do specific questioning in groups of 6. Once we got to specific questioning of this juror's group of 6, I called him to the bench and I just looked at him and I said, "What are your pronouns?" And his eyes lit up and he said, "He, him." and I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "Max." I said, "Max, I don't remember the last name, so I'm going to use Smith, but I said, "Max, go back to the bench." Go back to your seat. I called the lawyers up to the bench and got them on the right path, and everything went swimmingly after that. I said, "From now on, this is Mr. Smith, and you should refer to him accordingly." And they did, and that was great. And Max left with a big smile on his face that day, though I don't know whether it was because he was treated with dignity and respect in the courtroom or because he was not selected for the jury. Probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, he was definitely felt seen by the court. You're up on the bench in a very dignified black robe. You have all the power, and here a judge recognized him and saw him. So I think that's very important. And I do think it was probably a little bit of both that he didn't get selected.
But I shared that story with my colleagues, and also, I have put together a training that I do on navigating situations pertaining to gender identity and sexual orientation in courtroom settings that I've now done 5 times. Once for the state court judges statewide, once for the chief magistrate judges. I did it again for the Gate City at an event that was sponsored by the Gate City Bar Association judicial section. I did it for a group of municipal court judges in Oregon via Zoom. Nice. And then I just did it at a specialized training for Georgia judges in Athens within the past month. It was more of an implicit bias training, but it makes a difference. And like I said, the cool thing about our bench is that there is someone who shares the life experience of, the people who come in front of us in DeKalb County in just about every way. And that's an important diversity that's important diversity to have on the bench in DeKalb for sure.
The evil twin of diversity is divisiveness, I think, where you have people that use their want to use their beliefs, their political orientations, whatever else. And I've always thought that the jury system, particularly in the last 10 years or so, is really a very good model. I hope that when you put 12 people in a room, regardless of what their past experience is or what their past background is, and you give them some important issue to decide, they can speak from their viewpoints, but they can listen and hear, and they can all come to a unanimous decision, about that.
Oh, I have said that exact thing to numerous people. If you are losing faith in our system of government, because of the tenor of what you hear out there in the public sphere, and it pertains more to the 2 political branches of government, just come and watch our jury system at work, because time and time again, I send a diverse group of 12 people back into that jury room, and they come out. A hung jury is a rare occurrence. That's just a fact. A hung jury is a rare occurrence. And so time and time again, these diverse groups of 12 people drawn from throughout DeKalb County come out with a unanimous decision. And sometimes they come out laughing and talking to one another, and like they've actually built some relationships back there. And it really does give you heart about how we relate to one another as people and about our system of government. I think our jury system, can serve to restore some of our faith in how we interact with one another around important issues.
Judge, talking about the rule of law, you've now been on the bench for quite a while. You've seen a lot. And you saw a lot as a legislator too, but I'm curious, have you seen a difference in the way people behave in the rule of law, respecting the rule of law? Have you noticed any change in who is in front of you or the types of cases?
No, I can't say that I have.
Do you think the rule of law is as strong as it was when you first took the bench?
I'm concerned about that. in terms of how, and I do my best to point out, one of the things that is part of my opening spiel in the courtroom to jury pools is, I usually started off by saying, I know not everyone turns cartwheels when they receive that jury summons in the mail, but let me talk with you about, why your service is important. And, I talk about how we're going to, say in civil cases, select 12 of you, and misdemeanor criminal cases, 6 of you to serve on this jury. And then, that jury gets to talk with one another and consider each other's views and hear one another out back in the jury room. But ultimately, when you reach a verdict, you have to return a unanimous verdict. And what that means is that not only are you reaching a collective decision, but each of those people on the jury individually has to decide that decision in the case is their individual decision as well. And think about the significance of that. It is not just one person fallible. I mean, judges are human too. Let's just put that out there. We make mistakes. And that is far superior to the alternative of having one person sit up here and hand it down. And that's the way it's going to be. And particularly when, the fact is that's one person who can be fallible. Our jury system is aimed at, everyone hearing all the evidence and there being some communication and discussion back in the jury room, but ultimately 12 people individually coming back and saying, yeah, this is the way the outcome should be. And that's really an amazing thing. And when you see that happen time and time again, it does restore your faith in the rule of law. I think the problem with things in the public domain is just that, we always hear about the most sensational stories these days in the popular media, and also, whether, depending on what channel you're watching, it tends to have a perspective to it too, right? I mean, I think it's important for people to know that you have judges on the bench each and every day who are committed to the sanctity of the rule of law, to there being one source of law that has come from the people, faithfully applying that law and letting the people who participate in that process, meaning our once a case gets to trial, our juries, within what the law provides, decide where the truth is. And that's the way it should be. And it really is operating as designed from where I sit. But it's hard because of the tenor of the public discourse these days for everyone to see that. But I hope my talking about it today gets across that it's working and that people should have some faith in it. Should have faith in it.
Yes, totally agree. And I often point out to jurors, to my jury in a trial, that what we are doing in this courtroom right now, other jurors are doing it in all kinds of courtrooms in every state in America. Juries decide questions like this every single day. But I guess to your point, the fact that 12 citizens get together and decide a case, and it's going on in every court in every county and every state in America at the same time, that's boring. That doesn't make the news. That it's working as planned. Everything's going great in all of the courtrooms. it's to your point, only the outrageous things get into the press.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be boring, because
it's not boring to me.
No, I know. I certainly, I mean, given what I do for a living, I find it very interesting. Actually, it's really cool.
Yeah,
but
I love it.
But yeah, I mean, it's important, and it's real, and it's working, and I hope that gets across.
I'm curious, one of the things that's, I guess, Robin specifically asked you about the rule of law. And one of the things that we frequently mention in conjunction with the rule of law is the word civility. And you were talking about the public discourse, which is manifestly uncivil in so many respects today. And I think is sometimes sort of a symptom of the coming attack on the rule of law when people lose their civility. Are you seeing any erosion of civility amongst not just jurors, but lawyers that appear in front of you?
Unfortunately, a little bit. And, I hope that doesn't become a trend. I do think it's not just a byproduct of the public discourse. I think, COVID frayed a lot of nerves. It was a time where we didn't get to enjoy and experience the social interaction that we're all accustomed to. And, it really changed a lot of things, including, I think, unfortunately, how we interact with one another. I just do my best to be kind, and I can, when appropriate, be a bit humorous and use that sense of humor to lighten things up and kind of telegraph to the courtroom that we're all people here. I just hope, members of the bar will be good to one another and realize, yes, you have a client to zealously advocate for. But, at the end of the day, our institutions of government, including our courts, are people-driven institutions, and how we relate to one another matters. And that includes, between counsel, even in the thick of litigation.
You spoke a little bit about COVID and how it sort of isolates folks. And one of the things that I see sometimes in judges, as you know, I represent some judges from time to time, and have seen it with some judges who have gotten into trouble, is that they sort of isolate themselves. And just looking at your resume, the things you're involved in, like Leadership DeKalb, the high school mock trial, the Random Acts of Kindness bus tour, the Stonewall Bar Association. Can you talk a little bit about how being involved in those kind of things sort of give you maybe some context as a judge that you wouldn't already have? And I mean, I think we've gotten into this situation where we've looked for more and more isolated judges. I think we've taken maybe too much. When John Jay was Chief Justice, he actually went and negotiated a treaty. I'm not sure we're doing better than John Jay on the U.S. Supreme Court right now. But all these extrajudicial things that you do, how does that come into play for giving you context sort of for the larger world that's being played out in a trial in front of you?
It's that we're all, I mean, the code, I think we have to start here. The Code of Judicial Conduct recognizes that judges are people, and that we have interests outside the courtroom. It's just that there are some rules we have to abide by in order to preserve the impartiality of the courts and the integrity of our judicial offices. But I mean, I talk a lot of, I like to interact with people, and I'm an extrovert, and goodness, if I had to be isolated in that courtroom all the time, and that was the only thing that I could do. I mean, frankly, I don't know that I would be serving on the bench because that goes against the grain of my nature. And so, social interaction is important to me. And just to take a couple of examples, one you mentioned, one you didn't mention. I personally, so Leadership DeKalb, I actually just started yesterday as their board chair. So I'm just starting my 6th year on their board of directors. It'll be my last, and it turns out I'm now the board chair. But what I love about Leadership DeKalb as an organization is that, it's an organization, most judges on the DeKalb County bench have been through the program. We draw people from, every walk of life in DeKalb County. It's an institution that pulls people. It's a nonprofit organization, but it's an institution that pulls people out of their corners in DeKalb County and gives them some perspective and some tools for dealing with the issues and the circumstances of DeKalb County, and then sends people back out into the community to operationalize that as leaders in our community. There is no other institution in DeKalb County that does that thing, and it's really cool. I mean, that's why I love doing it. So that's something I've become very involved in, just because, helping people who, are leaders, are, hold, positions or roles of responsibility, understand what it means to be, to do that in our diverse DeKalb County community. That's important to me. And that's something that, as I've discussed, translates very well to something that's important to me as a member of the judiciary as well. Then the other thing I enjoy doing on the kind of the lighter side is I love to sing. So I'm among all the other things that we've discussed, I'm a baritone in the Atlanta Gay Men's Chorus. You might catch me out there singing a show tune from time to time. I'm actually a decent singer, not the best, but decent. And it's something I enjoy doing. I mean, and it's kind of, every once in a while so occasionally on my social media, I'll post, about a chorus event that I sang at or something. And, and people come up and talk to me about that. And there's nothing inappropriate about talking about singing with, a lawyer who wants to talk with you about it, or someone who, might appear in the courtroom we're humans. And that's the point. So, I find that those things, because, you've got your caseload and you've got the cases you're working on, and you can't ever talk about those. And that's the way it should be. It's not just the rule, that's the way it should be as an independent judiciary. But there's so much else about who we are as judges, that I don't mind, people knowing and wanting to talk with me about, and frankly, I think that that's also important to the public's trust in the judiciary, to recognize that we have real people on the bench. And, frankly, like I said, I mean, the Code of Judicial Conduct recognizes that very fact.
That's great. And I love the that you love to sing. I love to sing too. Unfortunately, people don't love to hear me sing, so I don't have the ability to go do that. But that's the kind of thing that I think puts a human face on our court system.
I remember some great nights. The DeKalb bar would have karaoke night too, and you were pretty awesome at those events as well. And always enjoyed those. You mentioned your social media, and it is widely known that you do post about your personal life on social media. You are, as a judge, you have to run for office with the public voting for you. And also, I know that you have your courtroom has a YouTube channel that you often show your hearings or arraignment. I'm not sure exactly what all you show on YouTube, but what do you think about the rise of social media and judges using social media, and how do you approach it?
Well, I mean, I think it's important for the way that we relate to the. Going back to the point I just made in response to Lester's question, I do think, and I know there are other judges who feel this way too. I think I'd be, properly ascribing this to Judge Dillard, for example.
The Twitter laureate.
Yeah, I mean,
we talk about him often on this show, so
Yeah, I mean, I think that our, showing us as humans, living our lives is important for instilling confidence in the judiciary. I mean, so I think you start from that point. I do have an active social media presence. Again, as with anything in being a judge, you have to make sure that you're compliant with the code of judicial conduct in terms of what you're posting. There's never anything political on there. I try to be careful about the who I'm taking pictures with, because you want to make sure that it's not people who regularly appear in your courtroom, for example. You have to be intentional about certain things, but I like I said, I mean, I like that people know the work that I'm doing with Leadership DeKalb because it's important to me, and I like that. Someone might strike up a conversation with me about singing, for example. I mean, and all of that, I just humanizes us as judges. So it's to my mind, if not everyone does it, but to my mind, it's appropriate and helpful for the public to see our judiciary out there engaged in the community and in our day-to-day lives in terms of what our interests are and who we are as people.
Judge, tell us in your job, what do you like most about your job as a judge?
A combination of things. It's the interaction with people in the courtroom and the opportunity to do things within the law that are positively impactful on people's lives. I mean, Georgia, for example, has, specific statutes that deal with record restriction after, a misdemeanor conviction, that allow, for example, in DUI cases where an ignition interlock device has been imposed but might present a financial hardship. I mean, defendants who have not, had subsequent offenses for a long period of time often file those motions and obtain relief. And, it's sometimes it's nice to see, people who have been able to avail themselves of the laws pertaining to matters such as those, after, getting themselves on the right path, obtain the relief that the law provides. So that's one part of it. And then personally, I also enjoy the good, interesting work that comes off our civil docket. I mean, like I said, I'm a civil practitioner. So, where I was a civil practitioner, I no longer practice law, but throughout my time in practice, I was a civil lawyer in one form or another. The good, complex written work that we get out of civil cases truly is interesting, and I very much enjoy doing it.
All my friends who are state court judges, one of the things that they say they're happiest about is that state court has no domestic relations jurisdiction, so they don't have to do that, which is, I think, for folks like me who at one time in my career did very little bit of that. That seems like one of the real fringe benefits of state court judgeships.
Personally, I mean, and there are people who came out of the felony world and enjoy doing felony cases. There are people who came out of the family law world and enjoy doing family law cases. As for me personally, I would not trade the jurisdiction of the state court for anything.
What's the hardest thing about your job?
I would say the hardest thing about the job comes on the criminal docket. And that is that there are, for as much as we have made advances in terms of, for example, accountability programs affecting mental health and substance abuse, there are just a lot of problems out there, and they can seem overwhelming sometimes. And you can't, for as good as the resource, for as improved as the resources are at this moment compared to a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there still are not adequate resources to address all of the issues. And so when you find, oftentimes mental health issues and substance abuse issues find their way into the criminal justice system, and it can be frustrating to not have adequate resources. And that's not taking away from the existing resources that we do have. I mean, DeKalb County has an excellent misdemeanor mental health court that's run out of our magistrate court, and it's really a great program. But the problem is just seems so overwhelming at times, and that is it's frustrating to deal with.
We have great resources. We just need more.
Yeah.
What would you want a general layperson who may be listening today to know about state courts in Georgia?
That you have a hardworking bench, with a high volume of cases, where we're here, churning out work each and every day to keep that docket moving efficiently. And that it really is, like I said, I mean, we ultimately deal with a high volume of misdemeanor cases. And on the civil side, our two kind of highest volumes are in personal injury cases involving motor vehicle collisions on the tort side, and then debt collection cases on the kind of more contract oriented side. You're dealing with a system that works as intended, with judges who are faithfully applying the law, and that ultimately, you are going to get a fair, efficient hearing in our state courts, which are specially equipped to deal with those high volumes of cases. I mean, we literally exist to move those higher volume dockets efficiently, whereas, that might be more difficult in the Superior Court, where they have some, bigger cases, particularly on the felony side, that, eat up a lot of the bandwidth on their dockets.
What kind of lawyering do you see? And do you have any pet peeves? And we always ask that question about judges. Do you have any pet peeves? One of the ways I like to sort of flip that a little bit is, what do you see lawyers do that's just really effective in court in front of you?
Well, let's see. I mean, did you want me to answer the pet peeve question then?
Answer either one you want to.
I mean, I don't think, judges will often talk about discovery disputes as a pet peeve, and in the sense that, you are required to have a good faith conference, which is a conference, not just a letter, before bringing those discovery disputes to us. I mean, I don't think, we just see too many of them, too many discovery disputes, where it just doesn't seem that the lawyers really have put their heads together in the first place to resolve a dispute before bringing it into court. And I really would encourage lawyers on both sides of civil cases to spend some time, really seeing what you can do to work through that discovery dispute before a motion is filed. That ultimately is going to be the best way for everyone to deal with their discovery disputes. And then on the kind of what has been done effectively, I think that juries appreciate conciseness, and sometimes lawyers don't get that. My sense is that when you are to the point, your questions are on point and thought through in a way that that you get responsive answers that move that move the examination along. When your closing arguments are to the point and really, hit on the things that the jury needs to hear about, and only that, juries do, in my experience, tend to appreciate that. That does tend to be more effective. I think that, I think you have to recognize that juries, the jurors are ultimately giving up their time to our jury system. I mean, even though it is under a court summons, they're giving their time. And I think that they appreciate when a lawyer conducts themselves in a way that shows respect for that.
Judge, our last question to every guest: is, how do you define justice? So I put that to you. What does justice mean to you, or how do you see it? How would you define it?
Sometimes the outcome of a case or a ruling goes your way, sometimes it doesn't. But justice ultimately is everyone leaving that courtroom feeling that they were heard, feeling that the judge understood what they were saying, and that outcome, whatever it is the product of everyone being heard, and the judge understanding both everything that was said or presented during the hearing, but also faithfully applying the law.
Wonderful. I agree.
Boy, we really appreciate you being with us today. This has been one of our great episodes.
It's always wonderful to talk to a judge on the state court bench too, where most civil cases are going to be heard, where I certainly do most of my work. I think Lester probably does most of his in state court. And as I said, most interactions between a regular citizen, if they're going to have an interaction with the court, it's going to be state court. So your job is so crucial to the civil justice system, and we thank you for your role in it. Again, let me just remind our listeners, we've been talking with the Honorable Mike Jacobs, Judge of the DeKalb County State Court. You can learn more about Judge Jacobs and the DeKalb County State Court at DeKalbStateCourt.net. That's the website for the DeKalb County State Court, or at his website, JudgeJacobs.com. All right, Lester, that was a great talk with Judge Jacobs. Very refreshing, and I really enjoyed it. But now is the time that we like to bring to the attention of our listeners an interesting law-related news item. And mine is about Taco Tuesday, even though today's Friday. There was a motion in the United States Patent and Trademark Office to cancel a trademark of the words Taco Tuesday that were owned by Taco John's Seasonings, and Taco Bell challenged the fact that they had a trademark and arguing that it couldn't be trademarked. And they had one of the most interesting pleadings I think I've ever read, called Petition for Cancellation of the Trademark. And it starts like this. This is the first paragraph in the pleading. People like tacos on Tuesdays. They just do. It's even fun to say Taco Tuesday. Tacos have the unique ability to bring people together and bring joy to their lives on an otherwise mediocre day of the week. But since 1989, entities associated with registrant have owned a federal trademark registration for Taco Tuesday. Not cool. The registration potentially subjects Taco Bell and anyone else who wants to share tacos with the world to the possibility of legal action or angry letters if they say Taco Tuesday without express permission, simply for pursuing happiness on a Tuesday. This violates an American ideal, the pursuit of happiness. Taco Tuesday is a common phrase. Nobody should have exclusive rights in the common phrase. Can you imagine if we weren't allowed to say, "What's up?" or "brunch"? Chaos. The petition is brought because Taco Bell believes that tacos, just like the joy they bring, belong to everyone on any day. Ergo, Taco Tuesday should belong to everyone. Taco Bell believes Taco Tuesday is critical to everyone's Tuesday. To deprive anyone of saying Taco Tuesday, be it Taco Bell or anyone who provides tacos to the world, is like depriving the world of sunshine itself. And it was successful. Taco John's relented and gave in the trademark. And then I noticed that Taco Bell, to celebrate, is having certain days where you get free tacos. For the next few days, they've named certain days: September 12, September 5, where you will get free tacos from Taco Bell. So Interesting pleading. I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Who I really feel sorry for is Thursday. That Thursday's just neglected by this icon of civility and joy. The taco. There are no Taco Thursdays, but they start with a T too. So.
I think of Thursday as Thirsty Thursday.
Yeah, that's true. I wonder if that one's been trademarked.
I don't know. What you got, Lester?
I'm on a much more serious and in some ways morbid kick with my article today, but it's an event that just happened today, which is our taping day is August the 11th, and it is from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And just as background, you may recall that there was a horrific shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh fairly recently. Contrary to what happens in a lot of these mass shootings, the perpetrator was actually arrested and was tried, did not kill himself or was not killed by police during the process of that. And so during the trial, which recently took place, of the shooter, there was another person named Hardy Carroll Lloyd in West Virginia, and he was arrested today on federal charges of trying to influence witnesses and testimony in the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting trial through emails and blog posts calling for violence against Jews and threatening to dox jurors, witnesses, and anyone who pushed back against his hateful rhetoric. The charges were filed in the U.S. District Court in northern West Virginia in a series of emails and blog posts that escalated as the death penalty trial against Pittsburgh synagogue shooter Robert Bowers progressed. Lloyd called for so-called lone wolves to target synagogues and Jews. Quote, walk into a synagogue and gun down 11 Jews and one rabbi, he wrote in late May. That's how you make a difference, people. Lloyd also took aim at jurors in the case, writing in one website post, y'all who are on the jury, make sure to vote what you know in your heart is morally correct. In another, he expressed a desire to obtain the jurors' names after the proceedings. Hope the jurors get told that and vote the right way, he allegedly wrote. I think this is very significant for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, the jurors are the lifeblood of our jury system, and as Judge Jacobs and all of us talked about, is really one of the last bastions of civility and good public policy that comes out. And so to attack that and to make jurors think because of their decisions they're going to have to be in fear for their lives is just horrendous. And I applaud the U.S. attorney for bringing these charges against this person. I think it also says that our legal system will protect you as jurors. We will take steps against folks like that.
I'm really glad they arrested the guy.
Yeah, and finally too, you hear a lot of folks today talking about in multiple contexts. Oh, it's the First Amendment. I can say whatever I want to say. And they sort of ignore the fact that, it is a crime to walk into a bank and say, I've got a gun, give me your money, or to a grocery store or wherever else. And so I just think the conduct here, and I will, of course, as I would with anybody charged with a crime, say they're presumed innocent. But you hear what the evidence is going to be here. And I'm glad that the U.S. attorney took this action, that they were able to do this to protect the jurors and more globally to protect our system.
And I think we've talked a little bit about social media, but unfortunately, social media allows someone like that guy to spread his awful ideas very easily with the click of a button and really do some harm and damage. I can't imagine as a juror having to be worried about that. That should never happen to our jurors. But it's become a reality, I think, with social media.
Absolutely. And I think the people that are doing this kind of stuff know that, and they know they can disrupt, they can sow discord just with one tweet or one Facebook post or whatever else.
Well, that does it on our end. I want to thank again our sponsor, the Georgia Civil Justice System. And we also want to thank our producer, Philip Hoover. And we thank our listeners for listening. You can learn more about our host, Lester Tate, at aikentate.com, and more about me, Robin Fraser Clark, at gatriallawyers.net. You may listen to all the episodes of the podcast at seeyouincourt.org. Lester, hope you have a great weekend.
You too. And I guess next time we will see you in court.
See you in court.
Thank you for listening to See You in Court, brought to you by the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation and the Georgia Institute of Technology. Please subscribe to this podcast and consider writing a review. You may find related documents to this week's episode on our website, seeyouincourt.podbean.com. Please send any questions, suggestions, or ideas to seeyouincourtpodcast@gmail.com. We thank Noreen Hassan, Associate Professor and Director of Outreach and Community Engagement of the Georgia Institute of Technology School of Literature, Media, and Communication, and the Georgia Tech students who help bring you this podcast. I'm Fred Smith, Executive Director of the Georgia Civil Justice Foundation. You may learn more about the foundation at fairplay.org. On behalf of Robin Fraser Clark and Lester Tate, until our next episode, we'll see you in court.